Fantasy Rugby Draft Podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and welcome to the 2018 Super Rugby season, The Decision. Joining me as always is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you?
Probably a lot of people out there are wondering, it's early in the season, rankings aren't out. What is the purpose of this podcast? I am one of those people. What are we talking about? Why are we here? It's a sunny day outside. It could be at the beach. Tell me what I'm doing here.
We're here to help our listeners form what is going to be the pre-season. So there's a bunch of things we're going to cover. So the first one is to look exactly what we are going to do for the next few weeks in terms of the schedule of the podcast, but also from the site as well. We're going to look at the 20 for 20 series that a number of you would have seen before Christmas, and we're going to see if we can go through in a little bit more detail. We had to form answers to those questions to be able to make our rankings, so we wanted to kind of give you our 14th of January view on what we have in pre-season. Going to have a look at a few competitions. Our first one we're going to release, and then there's a few other bits and pieces as well. We're going to introduce a new segment around Jose Curveball of the off-season or the week, as it may be. But from the start, I guess I'd be doing my journalistic integrity duty if I didn't ask you how many finals you were in last year, Mossman.
Oh, yeah, okay, all right. Let's get this out of the way then.
I thought I'd get it early, right at the
top. 3 finals, lost them all. Thanks for asking.
I was only going to ask you the finals. I wasn't going to ask the result.
Yeah. It's
one of those.
It's been tough.
Yeah. Well, you hit the sand dunes. It's the next year. New hope. So we've called the season, the 2018 Super Rugby season, The Decision. Mainly that comes down to question number 1 of our 20 for 20 draft series, which we're going to get into in a wee bit, but it involves a certain Damien McKenzie, and there's a lot of moving parts there. Folks that are lucky enough to get the number 1 overall draft pick are going to have that question, and what is their decision? Moving on to the format for the pre-season. So we've launched the site. It's open now. You can create leagues. You can join leagues. There's some public ones that are on the site as well. Just be mindful that there aren't any players loaded at this season, at this point of the season. So drafts won't run. 17th, 18th of January is when we're going to finalise our rankings and put them onto the site so that you can then run drafts. Now, most people, if they'd listened to you and I, which we don't necessarily think is the right path to go to 100% of the time.
We don't advise it, yeah.
No, exactly. But if you have been listening, we usually suggest that to draft as close to the start of season as possible. But for us, for our office league, we're actually drafting this Saturday, Mossman. So how much work have you put in for that thus far?
0 would be the answer to that. So it could be a busy week.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So there's a little bit of there's a subtle mood change in fantasy draft circles, I guess you could probably say, from last year, listening to a lot of the NFL experts about when you should actually draft. And we like to say close to the start of the season because you will then know what injuries happen during pre-season, but also combinations, what team lineups are probably going to look like, and basically who's looking good. Now, in the NFL, a few of the experts have said, well, we actually are going to shift that paradigm a little bit, and we're going to draft very early on in the season, before even the first pre-season game, because that's where the real expertise lies. It's the idea of being able to say, I know what the Chiefs' backline is going to be before you actually see the Chiefs' backline. And it's a little bit like having the answers, drafting late is a little bit like having the answers to the quiz. Now, I sit somewhere in the middle of that. I guess we're going to see what a January 20 draft looks like. It does bring pre-season into it as well, because waivers still run ordinarily, and if there's injuries and trades can happen in the pre-season, so it does make it a thing, but I guess we're going to find out this season if that's a way to go or not.
Yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting experience, so I guess we can report back on that, see how it goes.
Yeah, and I guess your season could be crushed 4 weeks earlier than normal.
I suppose it puts a little bit more emphasis on trying to get some inside word if you can, which I've managed to do actually. So I'm sure we'll come to that at some point. But yeah, I had a chat with Chris Boyd at a barbecue recently.
Oh, very good. Oh, I'll be looking to that. We've got a few 20 for 20 questions around the Hurricanes, so I'll be looking for that Boyd insight.
And the other thing I was thinking of, actually, and this is probably more some homework for you rather than something that you can answer right now, but with the Brisbane Tens, and I was thinking about last year and whether any of the breakout players from the Super Rugby season showed signs of that in the Tens, and whether as a fantasy manager, whether watching the Tens gives you any kind of insight. Now, I off the top of my head, and it was just something I thought of this morning, I couldn't think of any particular players, but something maybe to go away and have a think about.
The only player that springs to mind for me is George Bridge. He wasn't really a thing last year. He played well on the Tens, and he got his position more by injury than anything else, but he was a bit of a star there. I like the idea, though. I see Cal Heyman's turning up.
Cal Heyman, apparently Conrad Smith, and Tom Taylor, Colin Slade.
Those all can run with the ball nicely and would be very good for Tens. Cal Heyman. I guess let's move on to what our pre-season is going to look like. It's pretty formulaic, what we did in the last few seasons as well. As I say, we've got rankings and drafts that'll be opening up next week, so we'll probably have a podcast around that as well, and we can kind of kick the tyres on some anomalies on there and some players that are either too high or too low, or we've just completely whiffed on.
I was just thinking about Carl Heyman. They bought him a farm, didn't they, when he first made that move? Mm-hmm. So I wonder if for participating in the Tens, they just get him a quad bike or something. Basically, they just don't pay him. They just give him farm equipment.
They just give him a bunch of Ivermectin.
Exactly.
A bit of drench.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to have our squad reviews again. So we're going to have our experts on. So Reg Roberts from Green and Gold, Brendan Nell, Super Sport, and Rich Freeman from the Sunwolves, who's also been doing a bit of work on the sidelines as well, commentating some good stuff there. But we've also got Hawari's expert as well, Paul Tate. And also we've got an extra special New Zealand reviewer coming on, so keep an eye out for that one. We've managed to secure someone who knows a lot about New Zealand rugby and is very intimate with it. Coochie Town's going to do his blog again. He's going to run through his Aviva Premiership draft this season down at the pub. Now he's put a wee asterisk on that a lot of it is going to be a little foggy and hazy, but that's how we like our drafts to be anyway. We're going to see if we can do a few mock drafts as well. See if we can get some Facebook Live and stuff like that. But that's mainly our format for the pre-season. We'll get into when the season actually starts in terms of fixtures, because that's one of our 20 for 20 series questions as well. The first kind of competition off the rack that we're going to have, they're going to have a few of them as well, and it's one for our loyal early birds. A lot of the usual managers have signed up already and created a league, which is great. So we wanted to reward those guys, and they're signing up to Manager Pro as well. If you don't know about Manager Pro, it's our subscription model that we released end of 2017. It's got some great information there around team news and your lineup, team news in the player hub, but more importantly for pre-season, it's around your averages, so your average points per game, and also who finished hot at the end of last season. So if you go into the player hub and check out the 2017 stats, you can then filter by average points per game and form. And it's particularly useful in pre-season because, as we kind of at pains to point out, total points only really tells half the story. It kind of tells you that this person doesn't or didn't get injured, and it also tells you that they are regularly selected in the team. It doesn't necessarily tell you about how valuable they are as an actual point scorer. So the part of the competition is first 50 folks that sign up to Manager Pro go into a draw to win one of our Fantasy Draft Prolos that you've seen Mossman and I parading around on our Start Bench show, but also on the podcast as well. So the first 50 go into a bucket to grab one of those shirts.
Sorry, you were saying that they've seen us parading him around on the podcast. you obviously.
I've got a live audience here. You know.
The concept is. Oh, you're in front of a live audience. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've got a live audience.
People are holding up the applause button. The applause
yeah, that's right. Many people. Many. On that kind of point, I've got a question straight out of the gate for you, Mossman. Bit of a quiz. I wanted to see if you could name me, I guess first of all, let's try it this way. What the top 10 players were in total points for 2017 Super Rugby.
Name the top 10 in total points.
Yep.
Well, Mackenzie is number 1.
That's right.
The Vinsasso?
Yeah, he was down a little bit.
Okay.
Not in top 10.
Did Rico get in there?
Yep, number 6.
Okay.
His partner in midfield of Vinsasso's, isn't there?
Yeah, Laumapi. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Number 4.
Okay. And this could take a long time. There's a lot of players. Did the Lions front row sneak in there?
Yep, they did. Number 9.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll give you a hand because this is not necessarily the genesis of the question. So James Lowe, number 2, Skosan, number 3, Cronje, number 5, Dylan Lates, Havili, and Israel Folau.
Sure,
10,
okay.
Plus the 3 that you said. Out of those 10, how many of them do you think were the top 10 in average points per game? As if to prove the differences between total and points per game. Out of those 10, how many do you think would be in the top 10
maybe
points per game?
8?
No, it's a lot
Oh,
lower
really?
than that.
Because I thought what you were trying to say is that the point is that if you play a lot of games, then you're going to score a lot of points. So what you were trying to say is that... Yeah, what are you trying to say? Where are you going with this?
What I'm trying to say is that total points only tells half the story. It doesn't actually tell you how valuable you are on a game-by-game basis. So players like Duncan Matthews, for instance, 27 points per game. He's number 3. But he's not in the top 10. Bernard Foley, Ruan Combrink, all these players, not in the top 10 for total points. Mainly because of injuries or late coming on the scene or whatever it was. But it's to highlight the point that total points doesn't tell the full story. So the answer to the question is actually only 2.
Right. I mean,
there's only 2 players.
It's a little bit of a false economy though, isn't it? Because you can play one game, score a lot of points, which is basically what Combrink did at the end of the season. Would you really have wanted to draft Combrink?
Yes, I would have. I would do it over and over again. Drafting Ruan Combrink.
To hold on to him for 2 games at the end of the season.
I would have drafted him at the start of the season if he wasn't injured.
But you knew he was injured.
That's what I'm saying. Oh yeah, I'm not going to draft him now. I'm saying, would I draft him now knowing that he gives a 25 point per game? I guess I know what you're saying. Yep, we're talking about different things. I wouldn't have drafted him to hold on for 2 games, no, but I would drafted him on the risk that he wouldn't get injured if he wasn't injured at the time.
Oh yeah,
if you know what I mean.
Really strong point you've made there. That's a cracking argument, well done.
Well, the point being is that players like Damien Willemse, Richie Mo'unga, Combrink, Foley, these are all star players, but they don't appear in the top 10 of total points. So if you went to draft and just looked at your rankings based on total points, then you're not going to give a true story of who is actually a valuable player for you and who you should draft in 2018. James Lowe, Damien McKenzie were the only 2 on the list. The top 10 in points per game average is McKenzie, is number 1, no surprise there. Foley, Matthews, Combrink, Damien Willemse, James Lowe, Mo'unga, Naholo, and then here's your point, Dukasa, which is the Kings 8, and SP Murray. So out of those, there's really only one that kind of is a bit of a misnomer because he has had that one big game. I would expect the rest to actually score those averages from a longer from a season point of view as well.
Sure. And I suppose the other thing it proves then is that one-off performances where guys score massive points actually doesn't happen that often. So if you've got somebody who you're just thinking is going to just blow up one week, chances are it's not going to happen.
All right, moving on.
Let's do that. That was 5 minutes of my life I'll never get back.
In summary, points per game average, much better than top 10 total. 20 for 20. So should we? I think we should start at question number 20 because we'll tease number 1 question and a summary of what we think is probably going to be the most important question. But the number 20 question in 20 for 20 was who is replacing Malachi Fifita and how will Grant Nisbet pronounce it? So I guess the options we have at the Highlanders are Buckman, Taywalden, Fadders, Thompson and Umanga Jensen are probably the 5 or 6 players that you'd look at. I'm not 100% sure that it's very clear based on what happened last season. There were some injuries that kind of curtailed some seasons as well. Faddis had a go in there for a while. Buckman was out for most of the time, but when we came up with our rankings, it went with Buckman and Thompson as our 12 and 13. What do you think?
This is probably a situation that I have no idea. I mean, it's fair enough for you to come up with those rankings. I mean, I think last year we thought it was going to be Fadders, and it wasn't. But like I said, I mean, I think from when I look at these situations, I'm more interested in what your reasoning is. At the moment, I don't have any evidence to support any of these, so I'm interested to know what your evidence is.
Yeah, so Buckman I think was going to be their preferred either 12 or 13, and then Thompson started playing very well in the ITM, but also I think solidified a position in that Highlanders midfield somewhere at the end of last season. Wasn't a hell of a lot more to go on because Taywalden got a sniff at the start of the season before he was injured as well. But I had to lean one way, and I think that Buckman is one of their favourites, and Thompson's a pretty proven 12, so I thought they'd lean that way, at least to start the season. Number 2 is who is playing the left wing for the Crusaders. Options include Seta Tamanavalu, who's traditionally more a centre/right winger. George Bridge, Matalei, Dag, Makalai's there. We've even got Braden Enor, who was pretty impressive for the ITM for Canterbury, and Will Jordan, who usually plays 15 as well, but I guess there's a chance he could be on the left wing. Do you think that we're going to see, if you were to put your money where your mouth is right now on the 14th of Jan, Dag, Havili, Seta Tamanavalu, back 3?
Sounds fair.
I think so as well, and I think that's the way that I saw Seta played on the left in the Northern Tour as well. So for our rankings, that was the assumption that we made. Until we see otherwise in pre-season, that's where we went. Question number 3: how do we rank Israel Folau?
Highly, I think is the answer to that question.
Yeah, it is. It's highly, right? And it's how high? So he's going to have is he going to have a change of position? No, he's going to be an outside back. And the main reason he's going to be an outside back is because of one of the signings that the Waratahs completed probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually, just before Christmas, was Curtis Rona. So I suspect it will be Beale, Rona and Folau at the back, which would inflate his value as an outside back as well, and overall amongst all the players. This one's a really tricky one, and one I actually couldn't answer. So Lions midfield, you've got Harold Vorster, Van Rensburg, who's tearing up trees in Sale, playing really, really well, and you've got Lionel Marpeau as well. I got the impression at the end of last season that they were leaning away from Marpeau, and they were actually going with Van Rensburg and Harold Vorster in the 13. Have you got any kind of view on that?
That would surprise me, I think.
Do you reckon you're more of a Marpeau?
Well, I just thought the Vorster thing was more because of injury. But, yeah, again, it's probably not something that you're ever really going to know. Yep.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it's going to be difficult as well because you're probably not going to see a hell of a lot in pre-season because Van Rensburg is in Sale, and I don't think he comes back for another couple of weeks, so it might take a while to get back into camp. And actually start getting that to 12. So difficult to see here, but certainly the rankings were made based on a Van Rensburg, Vorster 12-13. But even if, the thing with Marpeau is he scores well. So even if he's got a lower percentage chance than he'll start over Forster. He usually scores better than Forster when he does play. So there's that to consider as well.
He's also a chance on the wing if there's an injury.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, that's very true. Wannisco and Combrick gets injured, and that's proven to be the case in the last couple of seasons. Blues fly half, so Terry Black went down. This is question number 5. Terry Black went down middle of ITM Cup. Pretty devastating for him. They've got Stephen Pera franchise there and Bryn Gatland. They've also got Daniel Kirkpatrick, I think, is there as well. But I think it'll be out of those two. If you had to kind of plant your flag on one of them, or at least say which way that Tana Umaga is going to go?
Oh, I think Para franchise.
Yeah, I would have thought so as well. Interesting rumours about Quade Cooper going round to the Blues, mainly because he's been training with Sonny Bill. And I don't know if you've seen many of his Instagram posts or Twitter posts, but it's one of the greatest marketing ploys since Michael Owen to Real Madrid by his agent. It's insane how many videos of him doing some sort of CrossFit or throwing a medicine ball with Sonny Bill Williams is actually out there in the ether. It's big trying to come and sign me, but it doesn't look like it's working. I'd be surprised if Tana went down that route, and I think there actually is still a chance he's going to play for the Reds, but that's neither here nor there. Question number 6 is the Hurricanes front row. So Dane Cole's out injured again. We don't really know exactly when that's till, maybe the middle of the season, I think I heard last, but I mean, that loss coupled with the emergence of Asafo Amua is going to be one of the interesting points for the Hurricanes front row. Now, do you think they're going to put Amua straight in there, or do you think they'll go for the Italian henchman?
I think it'll be a timeshare. When I was talking to Chris Boyd, he didn't name check both hookers, so okay. I just think that he rates them both probably in different ways. I think we'll see a lot of both of them.
Yeah, I like that. So, yeah, for the Hurricanes front row, I think, you've lost one with Dane, but looking at what Amua does towards the ends of games as well, if that's when he is coming on, I think you're going to go pretty well there. That's going to be a highly ranked front row anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to be afraid to go to the Hurricanes front row, even with Cole's not there.
Yeah, and if you get Coles coming back halfway through in the season with those other two, that's pretty impressive. That's going to be pretty strong. There's a good prop there actually as well. I can't remember his name, but yeah, very, very strong prop who's playing well in the ITM Cup with Amur. Name leaves me. Question number 7. Now this is a little bit of a sneak peek into question number 1. But who do you think is going to be playing 15 for your beloved Chiefs?
Shooter.
Yep, that's the way I went as well. Is that just for experience where he's played there before?
I don't think there's a whole lot of competition really for that spot.
No, that's right. So there's LMNOP, right? He was playing 15 for the Northland in ITM Cup, but I think he'll probably switch onto the wing with him.
Yeah, I think so too.
So you have TP, Tony Pulu, the Enigma. Is he going to be on the other wing, do you reckon? If you had to put it? Got Nano Williams, I guess, yeah.
That's right, yeah. Fisiahi is gone. Yep. Not that he was really a factor anyway, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah, right. I think that's certainly where we ranked it anyway, as we put Stevenson at 15. Got the pedigree there as well. Here's your question for Chris Boyd. So it's a 2-part question actually, was question 8. So Milner Scud is out. Again, I don't think it's for the duration of the season. I think it might only be for half it as well, but who do we think is going to be playing on the wings for the Hurricanes? I guess the options include the Goose, Severe, Aso, Lamb, Jonah Lowe. Any insight from Chris Boyd?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's actually another player that kind of feeds into that. You know, Chris Boyd told me that he thinks Proctor is the best 13 in New Zealand.
Wow, the Assman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm always confused when you say that now because
I know.
So it's just like, yeah, it's not the ideal nickname, is it?
But,
no. Yeah, thinks he's the best 13. Just thinks his all-round game. Now we've sort of talked about Proctor before that we wondered because he wasn't a great fantasy scorer. There must be other parts to him, and obviously Chris Boyd 100% thinks that. So definitely suggests that Arso is going to be on the wing. Anytime Proctor's available, I think he'll be his 13. I mean, you can't say that and then not pick him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he showed that at the start of last season as well, is that the Assman was starting at 13. Ahead of Arso in that position, and Arso was shifted out one. So that actually was my second part of my question, was the Hurricanes midfield, the Assman or Arso? It sounds like you've answered that with the Assman. Interestingly enough, we put a Twitter poll out before Christmas because Arso has come through to us, unsurprisingly from Opta, as a midfielder. So we're at pains to kind of change a position unless there's overwhelming evidence to suggest that they should be. For instance, Damien McKenzie actually was I think it was a fly half last year, and he was obviously playing at fullback, so it's the flip side this year. But It sounds like we may actually have to change Arso and put him as an outside back. That's where certainly I've ranked him, and we went through and ranked him. And the Twitter poll surprisingly said that he's 75% should be a midfielder and 25% an outside back. So it was a little bit surprising there. But so back a question. So Severe and Arso.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. All right. Number 9. And this is a really wishy-washy one. Lions without Ackerman. How do you think that team is going to settle? There hasn't been too many personnel changes per se. It'll be just whether players like Van Rensburg, Yako Creel, Warren Whiteley from Japan, and injury all come back and put in the same amount that they do for Ackerman. You got any view there? That's a real tough one.
I think the only thing that you could say, and it's something that I don't know, is within the new coach was part of the previous setup. Was he an assistant? Is he someone that brought in? Do you know that?
No, I don't. No,
so I think that would be the question, right? If he's part of the same setup, if it's been some sort of succession plan and he's moved into that role, you'd expect him to be much the same. That would be my guess. If it's somebody else, then you'd have to look at that coach's pedigree, perhaps. I don't know at this point.
No, fair call. That's a good call. Question number 10, and this is more around leading into the question number 11, which is the fixtures. So with the loss of Force Kings and Cheetahs and the change in the structure is that New Zealand teams are going to be playing each other more than they did in 2017.
They're playing the same number of games against New Zealand teams, but they actually increase the games they're playing against other people. But it depends on which teams they're playing, and I think the assumption here is that the teams they're playing against are going to be better because we've lost some of these other teams. And, and that may or may not, that may be fair. But I think this is one we would probably need to look at, and we can do this. We can look at the stats and say, okay, is the games involving New Zealand teams against each other, how do they stack up in terms of the total number of fantasy points scored? And we can look at that and we can come back to that.
Yep, no, that's fair. That's a good summary of what I was trying to say, with the much better succinctly put. Question number 11, and this is more around a bit more detail in the fixtures. So the first two, Sanzar again, have pulled it out of the bag in terms of creating a fixture schedule. The first 2 weeks are only so it's a Hawaris and 3 South African teams playing. And then game week 16 is the last of regular season as well, and this one is just it doesn't have any of the South African teams in it as well, plus the Hawaris. So it's if you can get, it's how you want to plan it. So I guess you've got to make a decision with your league as well. You can draft after the first game week and just completely remove that game week from all proceedings so that everyone gets the same amount of, everyone gets just a tie in that position. However, what you are doing then is you're reducing the value of each of those teams in the first game week because they lose those games. There's a big kind of trade-off there as well, and that's when it comes paid off in game week 16. And if you're in game week 16, or at least a little bit earlier, 14 and 15, and you've already clinched, then you may be able to make some hay with a lot of those teams needing to scramble and putting in New Zealand teams and Australian teams by picking up some of those Sharks players or Stormers players or Lions players in game week 16. So there's a little bit of jiggery pokery from Sanzar again. We had a very similar situation last year, Mossman. What do you think your approach is going to be?
So I suppose there's probably 2 parts to that, and the first one is you're talking about eliminating week 1, and you could get that situation. There's often a whipping boy in your league. Now, if you were drawn to be playing that team, and of course it might not be obvious at the start of the season who that team is in week 1, and took that tie, that potentially could be a disadvantage for somebody based on the way the draw turns out. So it's just something to think about. With regards to week 16, so that's your final that we're talking about. So no South African teams in the final?
No, that's the final regular season, sorry. So there's 3 game weeks after that.
Okay,
so 17, 18,
so you're
19.
talking about the fantasy last regular game week.
Not
the last game regular.
No, that's right.
Okay, gotcha.
The last fantasy
sure.
of regular season of the fantasy season.
Cool. So the playoffs are not disrupted by this kind of stuff?
No, they've got not by a big chunk like this.
There's
still buys, exactly,
sure.
yeah, but there's not a huge amount. I mean, there's 15 teams, so there's always one that causes the issue, but not as a big kind of 5-team chunk like this.
Yeah. No, I mean, my impression was last season that it didn't play too much of a role.
Yeah, I got the same impression. When you actually got to that game week, there were either players there that had come from, I don't know, that you could pick up maybe a week before or 2 weeks before they were actually playing, and teams seem to be, because it's also around that whole month-long break, where international break as well, so a lot of stuff happens during that time. And do you take the bird in the hand at the start of the game week or the end of the game week as well? And you found that there was a lot of teams themselves, proper teams, that were resting players or trying to patch them up for the Super Rugby playoffs, so that they were giving them a bit of a rest around that time as well. If they're going to be heavily involved in the Springboks or the Australian or the All Blacks, then they got a little bit of a pass as well. So there was other players coming through that you could plug that position. Because I kind of went long. I played a little bit of the long game about looking at those game weeks and kind of factored in, but it didn't really play. It didn't really play as big a part as I thought in my advantage over those kind of 1 through 15 game weeks. They got eroded away. It wasn't a big boon that I got in game week 15, 16 like it could be.
No, I totally agree. I think my impression was that a lot of the scheming that you did looking towards the finals didn't matter. No. If you got to the final, you could have picked a team of half Sunwolves and you probably would have won.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's almost like you can get too much into the scheming, whether it's just better to let's just pick a good team, that's going to win. Don't think too much about the fixtures, and you just got to see where the cards fall.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you can kind of broaden that as well to a bit of a draft strategy. So there's obviously studs that you're looking for, that you want to draft and that you're going to aim for. But once you get down to that kind of second half of the draft, it's almost worth just looking at the first kind of 5 or 6 game weeks and looking at who's on form there and who's going to be playing well, because not only will that give you, the odd win here and there with your matchup, but it also gives you a bit of trade bait going into the second half of your season of guys that have blown up quite early that you can then try and ship for someone who might actually blow up in the second half. I think it's more of a situational game week by game week play than we kind of thought initially. Question 12, Sunwolves in 2018. So we have a new coach. We've got a whole bunch of new players as well. Players look okay. So look better, at least the backbone. Maybe the famous death knell for them, but they've got a decent 10 in Hayden Parker. They've got 15 in Robbie Robinson. I think Michael Leach is up there as well. There's a few players that, no offence to the Cripps family, but they just didn't have a 10, or the Tamura family for that matter as well. They just didn't have a really good quality Super Rugby. And Hayden Parker, whilst not going to be an absolute genius, he's got Super Rugby pedigree and he plays quite well when he comes on.
Yep, I agree with that. When you look at the ins and outs for the Sunwolves, they haven't lost too many players that look like they were, particularly valuable. A lot of incoming players and a lot of foreign players as well. Like non-Japanese players seem to have come into the team this year. I think they'll be better. And Michael Leach, I think, is a massive signing. He's been fantastic for the Chiefs. So I think they'll be better. And it's just season after season, they're going to improve. Sure, that they'll have matches where they get blown out, but I think they'll be better.
Do you think there's any chance that they've got one eye on 2019, with the World Cup? Because same coach, is it going to be that he's trying to kind of rest players to make sure they're okay for the Japan team when it comes around in June, or do you think he's just going to push his chips in?
I think it's hard to say. I can't imagine he's thinking about that this far out. Not playing players a year from the World Cup, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yep, okay. Question 13, and another difficult one, similar to the Lions one. What impact will Ledesma have on the Hawares? I guess my initial views was around, well, maybe it's more of in hope than anything else, is around discipline. That team is a high penalty count, but also yellow card, red card. So, I mean, I'm looking at you, Mr. Tomas Lavanini. But there are a number of other culprits in that team as well that have a pretty poor disciplinary record. And I'd hope that Ledesma coming in would try and install a little bit more structure and discipline to the Haweris themselves. Now, I'm not sure about the style of play that they're going to play, because he's usually associated with something that's a bit more hard grunt work. But I think the Hawaris will probably still be the Hawaris, just hopefully with a bit more polish to them. Any thoughts to that? That's a difficult one. It's the same one as the Ackerman, mate. It's difficult.
It is, yeah. I mean, and I think the thing is that with the fantasy players that you were looking towards, you probably weren't worried too much about discipline anyway. So that wasn't something that was necessarily going to put you off. What might put you off if you're talking about structure is Landau going to be taking all of those quick taps? That's
Sure.
probably the one thing that could actually, detract from that.
I think if Lavanini wasn't suspended or red carded every third game, I think he might be one of the top locks in Super Rugby fantasy. I genuinely believe that. He has got some very impressive stats in terms of ball carries, but also just his line breaks, his yards, his meters as well. He's very, very impressive. He just doesn't stay on the pitch, and therefore he doesn't get the support of the coach of playing him week in and week out, and he just loses his head. So hopefully he can be kind of squared up a little bit. Melbourne Rebels, question number 14 in 2018. We're assuming they're going to win the competition unbeaten.
Absolutely.
Right? So they've pretty much picked up most of the Western Force, have come east. So the Eastern Force, or the Melbourne Force, or the Force Rebels, which Return of the Jedi reference. But most importantly for me, I think it's probably their axis or their spine of their team that they've picked up. So Will Genia is a great signing. John O'Lance, very, very high quality 10. But players like Coleman, Phillip, and Haylett Petty as well that they've picked up in the second row probably is going to be the making of the Rebels, because their pack was probably one of the reasons why they weren't doing as well as they were. Their type 5. As well as the 10 issue from the last couple of seasons. So they've addressed that, and they've got some really high quality proven characters in there. And if they can get the ball to an interesting backline now, which is a little bit rejigged with no more of the old campaigners, and if they can get it out to Naivalu and Corabetti on the wings, then they're going to be dangerous. But all jokes aside, how do you think they'll gel, actually? Probably one of the more important things.
I mean, that's one that it's impossible to say. you just won't know. I did have a few question marks just around the front row. You'd think if you're doing all this recruiting, you'd want to maybe beef it up a little bit, and I got the impression they kind of hadn't. So,
in fact, they lost one, haven't they? They lost Tyrell Lomax to the Highlanders, I think. He was one that the ARU wanted to hold on to as well. So I think you're probably right there. There's still a bit of a question mark around that. Question 15, Damien Willemse. So when we first initially started out in the 20s for 20 questions, his position was a little bit under question with Jean-Luc Duplessis, and whether there was going to be any changes and who they're going to go for. But as it kind of unfolded over the last few weeks, it looks as though Jean-Luc's injury might be a little bit more serious than originally thought. So it looks like it probably is going to be Damien Willemse's job. They signed a backup 10 who is purely a backup 10, as I understand it.
O'Terry Black, was it? It's like the byword for a backup 10. He's a professional backup.
That's right. Clipboard Jesus, I think they called him in the NFL. Whatever
he probably has it on his LinkedIn profile. Super Rugby backup fly half.
Yeah, look good waving a towel, charging down the sideline, fist pumping. That's important.
Yeah, high-fiving the other guy when he comes off the field.
Yeah, that's right. Trying to hold the bench off with his arms out the sides, trying to keep the calm. Yeah. So it looks like Damien Willemse is probably going to be that starting 10, and maybe even Dylan Lates as a backup as well. So keep an eye out for the rankings next week, but I'm sure Damien Willemse will feature very, very highly considering he was, and if you give me 2 seconds, he was the number 5 points per game average last season, Damien Willemse. Now, he did have some big games sprinkled in there, but he looked pretty strong. And anyone that's going to... He likes to take the ball to the line, shall we say. So he's going to be in our favoured good books when he tries to break the line.
Yeah, well, I think it was the second leg of the semi-final. I think the Stormers played the Sunwolves and he just went off, went crazy.
Yep. Yeah, that was impressive. So one of the reasons why Damien Willemse is probably going to be quite high and why he has that starting position is because Bob Dupree's moved to the Sharks to be with all his brothers and father as well. So one of the original questions was, is he going to start at 10? I think there are still a few question marks from certain aspects of media and supporters around whether it's going to be Kerwin Bosch or Bob Dupree. We had to put a line in the sand for where we think the back line is going to lie, and from the 14th of January we've got Bob Dupree at 10 and Kerwin Bosch at 15. So he had a really, really great Currie Cup as Bob Dupree, and he was strong last season before his injury as well. So he'll be highly ranked in those fly half positions. You got any kind of differing view on Bob?
No, that sounds fair. Is Garth April still there at all?
Yeah, he is, but there are rumours of him going to other provinces because of this backup, but I believe he's still actually on the books at the Sharks.
I thought you were about to say these rumours have been not being very good.
Well, apparently the rumour is... It's unsubstantiated rumours. Apparently the story isn't so much as that he is not that good, it's just that I believe he's got a fairly sizable ego. Again, that's unsubstantiated, but one that the coach didn't particularly gel with quite early on. And so that's why when you saw the injuries last season, they were reluctant to go with Garth April, even though that he played quite well the season before. Dane Haylett-Petty's question number 17. Which side do you come down on? Is he a very good player in an okay team, or a very good player in a good team? So which is better? So is he one of the better players on the Force, which gives him a lot more points than being one of the better players on the Rebels, because there's going to be more points scored on the Rebels by other players?
Yeah, it's sort of the question suggested it's some sort of zero-sum game.
Yep.
Which I don't agree with. So I think he was great from a fantasy perspective at the Force, and I think he'll be better at the Rebel.
You think he is going to be better there because of winning, more rugby, that type of thing?
All of that kind of thing, yep.
Yep, okay, fair enough. And moving on to probably the three biggest questions that we've had from listeners, from managers in the off-season. The first one is around Jordie Barrett. So there's going to be a change of position with Jordie. We're going to list him as an outside back, but he is injured at the moment. We got a little bit of insight before Christmas from Chris Boyd. Do you have any more from him around his injury?
He said the earliest would be week 3, but more likely it's 4 to 6 weeks into the season.
Sure. Yeah, and we put it down as the week 5 in terms of his rankings coming back. So it obviously has knocked him down a wee bit. Jordie, he was in the top 5 kind of discussion quite early on before we heard stories that he wasn't going to be back fit for the start of the season. So where do you come down on Jordie changing position to outside back? How much of a factor is those first weeks being missed?
Oh, it's obviously a factor. I guess I'm probably not going to be as high on Jordie as a lot of people are. I think last year a lot of it came down to the goal kicking.
Sure.
And I did ask about that. I asked about the goal kicking, and Chris Boyd said, look, he doesn't really have anything to do with that. The guys kind of handle that within themselves. So that
is that right? I'm always astounded by that.
No, he said that it's up to them. He's basically if Beauden feels like he's kicking well and he's ready for that and he's kind of in the right zone, then he'll take it on. But he leaves it to them to sort out. He did say that he thinks Jordie's a better goal kicker. I guess it's probably maybe not by a whole lot, because the stats would show that. But yeah, he said when Beauden feels ready, he'll kind of take it on. which suggests that he should be doing it. Well, and that's the other thing, is that he did say that week 1, which I think is against the Bulls, Beauden won't be at 10. He'll be at 15. And it'll be High West in there. That's what he thinks.
Really?
And, yep. And he rates West goal kicking quite highly. So it sort of suggested that maybe you might see West kicking in week 1.
Wow.
But outside of that, he said between the three of them, they'll sort of sort it out.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, that's valuable, very valuable. So it sounds like the first point of that is that coaching in Super Rugby is pretty easy. You just let people do it, like a prop. I don't need to teach him how to scrum. He just go and figure it out himself. Who wants to be the captain? I don't really care. You guys sort it out amongst yourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he just basically goes, look, I'm just going to leave the room, and when I come back, there's going to be a team written on the board. I don't really care how it happens. Just make it happen.
I'm going to turn up after the game in the changing rooms. There better be a W on the board. Jesus. That's really interesting about Barrett, though, switching to 15. I hadn't really considered that. I hadn't really considered who was going to pay 15 in his absence. But yeah, that kind of does make sense. How much of an impact do you think that is on Beauden Barrett? Okay, so that's our next question. Question 19 is dovetailed into question 18. So Beauden Barrett. After that line series, I believe there was a subtle change in his goal kicking routine where he does a little circle beforehand or after, before he goes in to kind of get a 360.
Is it like Morné Morkel? He just goes back to the mark and just does a complete loop and then comes in and kicks the ball.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to look. I heard Justin Marshall say that at one point during the season, and I asked a few guys that went to the Northern Hemisphere games up in Twickenham, not Twickenham, in Wales, and they said that they didn't see that circle. But his goal kicking percentage has actually got a lot better after the lines, which was helpful. But so from the sounds of it, though, if he's saying that Jordie Barrett's a better goal kicker and he's going to have High West as the 10 for the first 5 weeks and probably kicking goals, then that's really interesting. Clearly, he isn't going to take any of the goal kicks.
Well, he didn't say for the first 5 weeks. He just said in week 1, this is what's going to happen.
Throwing a cat amongst the pigeons there. I like it.
And sort of just to expand on that a little bit, it was quite interesting because when I was talking to him and he explained that I was kind of involved in fantasy, and that's why I had a few questions, and he said, well, I don't know much about how fantasy works, and then he kind of went on to make some pretty astute observations about what fantasy managers should do, and he said, well, look, if I was looking at if a goal kicking is a significant factor, and I'm looking at Jordie and Beauden and whoever else, he said, well, I'd probably steer clear. He said I'd go for somebody that I knew was going to be doing it, like Richie Mo'unga.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that was his comment, not mine. I didn't sort of lead him towards it. So he just sort of felt that why would you take the chance on somebody where you don't know where it's going to fall? I mean, that's how open he sort of thinks that competition for goal kicking is.
That's really interesting. So I'm just writing down, get Mossman invited to the Coopers, Majors, Robertsons, Umanga's barbecue for Preseason 2019.
The funny thing about how it came about too, because he actually overheard me asking somebody else about how old Elvis Presley was when he died. So, because I'm big on my trivia, right? So it had come up in an early conversation, and I was talking to somebody who overheard me, and he said, it's funny because I was talking about that to somebody else earlier today, and so got talking about Elvis.
Right.
Talking about Elvis, and I sort of talked to him about I'd taken a trip to Graceland, and so that's how it came about.
That's fascinating. I like it. I like what you did there. So February the 16th, 1977, he died, right?
That's when he died.
Is that about?
That's right.
Yep.
Died in 77.
And when did he born?
When did he born? Clearly, your England is matching your
start like I mean to finish.
Maths skills. So by the wonder of the Google, I can tell you that was
carry the
8th of January 1935.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So he's a bit older than I thought.
Yeah. So he was
42
when he died. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, nice. Anyway, that was that's really useful about Beauden Barrett. I think That obviously means, I was talking about a little bit before about the first 5 weeks. If you're plugging for a player that just wants to be down in that kind of just another guy, then Ihai West might be someone to look at as well. If you've missed a fly half early, then that's probably not a bad kind of insurance.
Definitely. I mean, I'm not sure off the top of my head whether that is a home game against the Bulls, but if it is, then yeah, you could probably do a lot worse than picking up Ihai West and playing him in that game.
It's away.
Okay. Maybe not quite so much, but even still,
But what about the old saying, the hard and fast tracks?
Absolutely.
In South Africa.
I mean, the funny thing is, I don't think it would be detrimental to Beauden to play at fullback. You would almost think that he'd make up some of the points that he might not take in goal kicking.
I'd go one step further.
You think he'd be better?
Yeah. I do.
Right.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
I think for an 50% chance he doesn't take kicks, and even then it's going to be, how many did the Hurricanes kick a penalty last year? Maybe 3 penalties or something stupid all year? It was some crazy stat.
That's true, yeah, that's right. Yep, they ran everything, so, good point.
He's going to get run back meters so much more than he would at 10.
Yep.
Really interesting.
Although I think for me, though, over the course of the entire season, it would make me look at Richie Mo'unga over Barrett, just because of that uncertainty around that kicking.
So I'll give you a little where we are at the moment. Is that's what we have at the moment as well. Is Mo'unga over Barrett. Mo'unga had a good points per game average, much better than Barrett last season. And as you say, he's definitely going to have those kicks if he stays fit. Didn't kind of discuss any All Black influence with Boyd around resting or looking forward.
Absolutely, that was one of the things that I actually brought up because I sort of wanted to put that to bed if I could, because it's something that we talk about all the time, and you're always kind of dropping those hints. And I think I've always been a little bit resistant to the idea. And when I raised it with him, he said absolutely not. He said he's never spoken on the phone to Hansen. Hansen doesn't call him, doesn't ask him anything.
Snapchat, is it?
Yeah, that's it. They just stuff on Instagram and it's just sending each other animated GIFs on WhatsApp. So yeah, emojis. Yeah,
the shag emoji.
Yeah. Basically, there's no yearly meeting between Super Rugby coaches and All Black coaches. That doesn't happen. He said Wayne Smith might wander down to training, once a season if he's in town, kind of thing. But there isn't an open line of communication. He said that in 2015, the year that I think they won the title that year, or they got to the final that year, he said that there was stuff in the papers, and that Hansen in press conferences was sort of saying, we're interested in looking at Milner Scudder on the wing. And Boyd was like, no, that's not going to happen. Not in my team. He's our fullback and that's where he's going to play. We think he's the best fullback for the team. And so, there's zero influence. We talked about, Fifita and, whether, the All Blacks kind of fancy him as a blindsider. And he said, not in my team. He'll play lock in my team as long as Brad Shields is there. Brad Shields is our best 6, and that's where he's going to play. And so there's really no influence, and there's no this kind of mythical, like the call from Shag, to sort of put some pressure on. That doesn't happen.
Interesting. Really, two interesting points there. The one about Fifita is one that we've gone backwards and forwards with around what position he actually should be listed into his fantasy rugby draft, because he's come through as a lock, but we've seen him more regularly. And to be fair, it probably was because Shields was injured and because of the All Blacks, and that's where Fifita was playing. But we usually had him at loose forward. But if we're going to have him as lock, then he'll be one of the top locks.
Totally.
Has to be.
Yep.
Has to
Absolutely.
be, if not the top.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to give you a fly half stat?
I'd love that. That's what
I've
been waiting for.
Now, I'm going to butcher this as well, and you have to kind of sit down and get a pen and paper ready, because it's A, I'm going to butcher it, and B, it's not easy to actually kind of get in your head. But so 2016, fly halves in the top 12 average points per game played over 900 minutes there were 9 out of the 12 played over 900 minutes.
Jeez.
So that's fairly straightforward. 9 out of 12 played over 900 minutes. It's a lot.
2016 too, so you go back into the archives to get that one.
Going back into the archives, that's right.
What about last year?
2000. What was last year? Well, funny you mentioned that. So last year, of the top 12 average points per game played, how many do you reckon of them would have played over 900 minutes?
Yeah, there was a lot of injuries last year, so probably very few.
1. Only 1 out of the 12 in the top 12 average points per game played over 900 minutes. And there's only 2 above 800 minutes. I thought that was fascinating, and that has been, and I bring this up because of Beauden Barrett and because of this mythical resting or line into shag, but also because looking at players like Foley and Moanga, a lot of them got injured last year. Actually, pretty much every fly half, 11 out of the 12 got injured. Which has had some influence on our rankings for 2018, and that was just a little bit of a preempt for our rankings 2018. What we should have done as well is had a look at 2015 to figure out exactly which one is the telling the truth. If 1 out of 12 is actually the story, or if 9 out of 12 is actually the abnormality. But anyway, that's for next week when we go through the rankings. Our last question for our 20 for 20 was Damian McKenzie. So we named the season The Decision. What are you going to do at number 1? If you have the overall draft pick, are you going to pick Damian McKenzie? Let's just kind of break down a little bit first about where he's going to play and what he's going to be. He's going to be a fly half in Fantasy Rugby draft this year. And as we discussed earlier, we think Shooter might go into 15, Sean Stevenson. What do you think McKenzie's... We haven't seen McKenzie a lot at this level at fly half. I think he filled in for Cruden early on. I've got the Blues game at North Harbour Stadium in the back of my mind a couple of seasons ago when Cruden got injured that he played quite well in at 10. Where do you think, Damian McKenzie? Do you think he's going to put out the same output overall?
I think it'll be pretty close because I still think he'll be involved in kick returns. I think they'll find ways to get him the ball in space. They're not stupid. They know that that's one of his big strengths, and it's been something that's been a big strength of the team. That counter-attacking, and I'm sure that'll still happen. And you see it quite often anyway, is that fly halves sort of popping up in those positions towards the back on kick returns, and you'd be foolish not to get him involved in those areas. And then I think he'll just pop up across the field where he's needed anyway. So, from set piece, he'll stand there and he'll kick and he'll do all those sorts of things. But I think in phase play, he'll sort of just pop up wherever he wants to, which is a little bit what he did anyway.
Sure. Yep. I have a little bit more of I'm in the back of my mind, I have the Maori game against the Lions on that torrential day in Rotorua in the back of my mind as well. Now, obviously, not every defence in Super Rugby is going to be quite as good as the Andy Farrell-led Lions defence, granted. And you're not going to be playing under those conditions as well. But I think it brings him back to the pack fairly significantly. And when you're looking at him against all the other fly halves, I don't know. I'm not 100% convinced that they will. And another factor, I guess, who is going to be the backup 10 for the Chiefs? Is it going to be Tian Falcon? Young guy, 19s?
Well, just let me... Not
Marty?
Too concerned about that at this point anyway, but just going back to your point about the Murray game. So do you think he would have scored better if he'd played fullback in that game? And I guess leading on from that, who did play fullback in that game and did he have a good game? I think it was Milner Scudder, wasn't it?
Sure. Do I think he would have scored better? Yes, but I mean, it's not going to make a difference. Neither of them would have scored well.
That's the point, right? It was that game, those conditions, the team they were playing against. I think looking at that and thinking that is some sort of indicator, I think it's wrong.
I'm not saying that that's a driver. I still think he's going to be one of the top 4 fly halves, for instance, or top 5 fly halves. I'm a little bit nervous. The reason I bring up Tian Falcon, or Marty McKenzie actually, is probably going to be his backup 10. The reason I bring that up is because the scenario like the Beauden Barrett, where they're going to be encouraged to bring Marty Mac on, or will they be encouraged to bring him on at around about the 45-50 minute mark, which means that McKenzie does actually play about 35-40 minutes at fullback anyway. If it was just Tian Falcon there, I'm not sure they would have trusted him to move back there and do that, but I think there is a chance that he will play 15 in an ad hoc kind of basis. But I certainly think I'm a little bit less bullish than you are that he is going to be that same person. And he's also, to be honest, he's been fairly lucky with injuries. If you look at the fly halves, and if you look at all the other, looking at that stat we just talked about, they get beat up a lot, and he doesn't necessarily have that frame. So we shall see. So anyway, those are our 20 for 20 series. You can go and have a look at them on our various social. I think it's useful for you to form your own opinions. Mossman and I are differing on a number of these as well. And that's where you'll find the kind of the gold nuggets in your draft as well, is where we've ranked a player a certain way, and you know that managers won't see those players that you've got up your sleeve until much later. So if you can find some sort of differences in rankings when they come out at the end of next week, this is probably the first step, is getting these 20 questions answered in your own head. We're going to do a new segment this season on the podcast as well. It's going to be the Jose Curvo Ball of the Week. And we're going to start off doing one, an off-season Jose Curvo Ball of the Week. I'll start, Mossman. So this is a player that is either outperformed or done something a little bit strange, or we have a little bit of fun with over the season. So an example of this might have been last season, or the Warwick Hillant Jan Serfontein comedy show of kicking the ball out of his own end zone into Jan Serfontein's arse, as an example of our Curvo Ball of the Week. My Curvo Ball of the off season thus far is Carmichael Hunt. Have you been keeping up with Carmichael in his interesting ways?
I imagine he'd be quite difficult to keep up with. Has a lot of energy.
He does have a lot of energy. So my Curvo part of this is, we don't know who Mystery Man X is yet. Now, look, I know I'm sure probably have a few folks, it's either not important to people or not, but so for those that are under a rock, Carmichael Hunt was arrested, or arrested probably was it, just before Christmas. He's walking down the street with X person that we don't know, hasn't been named in the press, and he had a little bit of contraband on or around him, and then he's been stood down by the Reds because of it. Now the question I have was more around, so we've all watched movies, right? Usually the person who has the most sanction, or who gets in trouble in a kind of a two-person situation like that, is the person who has the least to lose. Someone, jumps on the grenade. And if Carmichael Hunt's the person who's got the least to lose, I've got two questions. Who is Mystery Man X, who's got more to lose? Or are movies just lies and fibs? Everything I've learnt from movies and lies are fibs, and Carmichael Hunt's mates just stitched them up.
Yeah, I think if they've been pulled over in a car, like and say that there was something in the glove box, a gun, drugs, whatever, then you could say, yeah, that's mine, instead of this NFL player that's sitting next to me. Because True. That's normally, that's often how that goes down. I think from these guys are actually on the street and was stopped, and they sort of said, empty your pockets. Pretty difficult to say, hey, that stuff in Carmichael's pocket, that's mine.
These aren't my trousers. What are you talking about?
How did this happen?
Yeah, that's right. We've just been at a massive rave.
Yeah. We swapped trousers at the pub. I just didn't know this was in here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. His name is Levi.
Even more Levi, difficult right? to explain.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my kind of curveball of the off season, and I put it as a curveball because I mentioned it quite early on in the piece as well. Is that Quade Cooper, whilst he's been trying to advertise to play for the Blues after a Terry Black got injured, I still suspect there may be a chance he plays on the Reds, and especially because beforehand it was going to be an axis, I think, of Stewart, Paua, and Carmichael Hunt at 15, but now not having that 15 might mean that either Paua or Stewart or someone goes there, and Quade has to kind of fill in as well. I haven't seen them replace that position for Quade, and he is still on their books as well, so I think there's still more to come from Quade Cooper there, but Thorne's made a quite strong opinion around him wanting Stewart and Paua as his way forward. I'm not 100% convinced that's more of to get these guys motivated for preseason, so we shall see. Have you got a curveball of the off season?
Not so much in that kind of frame, I guess, but just one thing that I just wanted to finish off with, just about something that Chris Boyd said. He kind of said, like I said, that didn't know that much about fantasy, but he said, like, but if you're looking for a player, you know, someone that might be a little bit under the radar, he said, Blade Thompson, he thinks will have a big year, and he thinks he'll go well. So I'm not sure where you've got him positioned as far as your positions go. Where is he?
Let me just bring that up. That's really interesting, though. So if you had, Fifita and him in the row, he's a lock at the moment.
Okay. So,
but if Boyd is going to put him there?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you might be expecting him to play in the loose somewhere. I don't know. Yeah,
really interesting. I think we'll keep him as lock. You got Fatty Alofa there as well, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
There's probably the other lockers there, and then if he's going to put Fifita in there, but yeah, nice. Maybe he will start him a bit loose. So you think Shields is a 6? Okay.
Possibly Thompson 8.
Thompson 8.
Hardy 7.
Yeah, that's the way I would read that, unless he goes with Reed Prinsep in there, which I guess isn't out of the realm of possibility.
It's not, but, you know, he gave Blade Thompson a big tip. So.
Yeah, he didn't say Reed Prinsep. He said Blade Thompson. Wow, okay, fascinating. All right, good one. Anything more from there? I think that's probably chewed up enough people's time for our kind of opening podcast.
Yep, definitely chewed up enough of my time as well.
Perfect. Quick reminder how to contact us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft. That's Fantasy AUG Draft. If you're looking for a league or an active player to join your league, then jump on the Fantasy Rugby Draft Hall of Fame Facebook group. There's a few folks that are playing for Jelly Beans in there as well. Or if you want to keep everything behind closed doors, as a lot of managers do, and they don't want to reveal a lot of their draft strategy this early, then send us an email on support@fantasyrugbydraft.com, and we'll get back to you as quick as we can. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
Don't step on my blue suede shoes.
Go to your repair.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a dummy!